Welcome to The Current by TreasureCoast.com, where we discuss interesting people, places, and happenings on Florida's Treasure Coast.
Working on it.
Of course.
So,
Yeah, of course.
yeah.
Cool. Well, Will, I appreciate you joining. I appreciate you being here. I'm excited to have a conversation with you, and more than anything, just to I think hear about who you are, and maybe we start there. Why don't you talk about who you are and maybe what inspired you to run for city commissioner in Stuart?
Okay. Well, I'm a 33-year resident of Stuart. Used to be a school teacher for years. I got out of that to take care of my dad for a couple of years. And then during that process of school teaching and taking care of my dad, I learned a lot about markets and things of that nature. So I kind of went into the entrepreneurial world, if you will, and set up a little pooled investment fund or a little hedge fund, if you will. And that's kind of what I do. So I follow markets and I know a lot about the macro or the bigger picture and things that are happening from the federal level down to the state level. And when I saw the state really begin to overreach here on a local level, that's when I said, I could sit behind the keyboard and be the keyboard warrior, or I can come off the porch and get into the fight directly. And I know we have people here, a couple of commissioners, my opponent in particular, that kind of buys into an idea that would see these plans that are coming from above implemented here to where it changes the whole look and feel of downtown Stuart. And I just don't want to see that happen. I would like to, keep this area as nice as possible for as long as possible. And if I can delay their plans by 4 years, then I'll do it. So that's why I decided to jump into the race.
I appreciate you mentioning that, and that's probably a good segue into what, in your eyes, what do you see as the biggest issues facing Stuart? And do you think maybe you can separate those between issues that maybe we can work on here locally and maybe some that are externalities from other cities or at a state level or a national level? I mean, whatever you feel is most important that's facing the city right now.
Right. Well, some of those are externalities, as you put it, as we have very limited control over. The greatest threat, in my opinion, is coming from the state and above them, actually. But the state's passing laws like the Live Local Act, Senate Bill 102, then Senate Bill 328. There was the Live Local Act of 2024, and then Senate Bill 180 that came down in 2025. So it's a steady march. It's a tactic that they use. It's a nice, slow, steady creep. But nevertheless, it's a very powerful march. And if you don't get in front of that, or at least call it out, then you will get steamrolled. And what you had is gone. So what can we do on the local level? We can try to put in as many walls as possible, like they're talking about Sailfish ball field, or the parks at Sailfish Park, the ball fields at Sailfish Park. And that's
Right.
a particular area that I think is going to be a main target. And there's plenty of evidence for that. So, number one, what we can do on a local level is increase awareness, really encourage our local representatives and senators to step in against that fight. And that's just one aspect. Then after the state and those laws creeping in, you have inflation running wild that's causing affordable housing issues. That, again, is also out of our control. The money supply is not in our control, but we have to deal with affordable housing issues. And in my particular neighborhood, I've literally had people knock on my door, say, "Will, do you know what's happening here?" I'm like, "Yes." And they're concerned. 75% of the people in my community are on fixed incomes, mainly retirees or whatever. And because of the increase, I live in a condo, so there's maintenance fees. And because of state mandates, with reserves and things of that nature, it causes tremendous pressure for people with fixed incomes. And then you toss in property taxes increasing every year. They were just talking about this last night at the City Commission meeting, the new budget coming. And you just look, in the less than 10 years, we've pretty much doubled the property taxes as far as revenue goes, ad valorem and such.
Right.
So that puts a huge pressure that the population of Stuart didn't double. So that means the money's coming from someplace. That means basically people are paying
Right.
significant more, and that's a problem. So those two things are the first that come to mind that are really the big pressures on Stuart.
It's interesting that you had pointed out. I think that's an interesting frame of reference, and obviously you have a background in the financial aspects. But when it comes to things like affordable housing and the money supply, and certainly whatever the Federal Reserve does is going to trickle down to what happens in Stuart, and apartments and multifamily housing. That's been a big issue, not just in Stuart, but I've seen it almost everywhere on the Treasure Coast, aside from some cities that really are trying to grow or they're trying to bring in that development. But in your eyes, what does like a responsible growth or responsible development look like, especially when it comes to something like downtown Stuart, where a lot of people value the character?
Exactly. The smart growth, responsible growth. What are we trying to do here? This is a question, like even last night, I'm asking the question to myself and a couple of people sitting next to me at the meeting. I'm like, what are we trying to accomplish here? Are we trying to protect Stuart for what it is? The goose that lays the golden egg, the place that everybody loves. When I moved here 33 years ago, fell in love with the place. I'd like to see it stay that way. I hear when I'm knocking on doors, I hear so many people say, "Oh, what's going on? I moved here because it was the small, charming town. I didn't want to live in a big city, but I see all this development." And they're concerned. And they know it's paused a little bit, but there's still, projects along Central Parkway and others that are popping up. So they still see some growth. So, ideally the smart growth would be, let's try to keep it similar to what we have. Any new project, there should be a continuity of theme, if you will. So if you're near the downtown area, you should have tops really 30-story height limit. And you have that new hotel, the Hilton True, coming in on Colorado, that's going to be 4 stories. Well, okay, does that really fit? And then what about the architecture? I was talking to a fellow yesterday. He mentioned the architecture. He would like to see any new buildings that come in, the architecture. So again, it goes back to smart growth. What are we trying to do here? Are we just going to go willy-nilly again, where we just let 2,500 to 3,000 apartments come be built within a 4-year span, increase the population by 25 to 30% very rapidly, and then where everybody's going to say, "What's going on?" So, smart growth over, just again focusing on what makes Stuart, keeping it that small, charming town, at least at the core, as best as we can.
Yeah, I know for a lot of people when they look at, I mean, and who knows? I mean, I'd be interested to hear, and I don't want to put you on the spot with this, but I am interested to hear what your thoughts are. If you think there is a solution for something like affordable housing, I know I've seen a lot of the housing that has come up along Central Parkway. I think Sailfish Cay, and there's, more. I guess they're townhome communities. It seems like most of the development that has come up, it's a townhome or it's an apartment complex, and a lot of it isn't maybe the single family homes that people are vying for ultimately. I don't know. Do you think that there is a solution for something like that? Is it something that you think we can solve here locally, or do you think it's just kind of maybe that's kind of a side product of having a place like Stuart where there is going to be more demand than there is going to be the homes that are available for people?
Right. You have massive pressure coming in here. A lot of people, 1.5 million people, would probably want to move here. Now, there's 1.5 million people in Palm Beach County. There's going to be 1 million people just north of us. You would easily get 1.5 million people who would want to move here overnight if they could. But affordability issues and things of that nature. But is there an answer to the affordable housing situation? I think there is. And I think it rests in what they call accessory dwelling units, ADUs. I've spoken with a couple of people about this to try to learn more about it. I'm no expert on it. I've talked to a couple of people who are experts. So that would be one area that you can increase affordable housing, because I did a study, and one of the things we can do to help protect and enable affordable housing here is protect our commercial properties. Like that development on Sailfish Cay, that was supposed to be a commercial property. It got rezoned to a residential. My opponent voted to rezone it to residential, and the units that came on there, townhomes types, were neither affordable, and they took away jobs. So we lost potential jobs. And I get it. I understand. There was no commercial developments that had happened there for almost 15 years. So that's a legit concern. But at some point, as all those other units around it had been built up, and there was other commercial properties that had previously been rezoned to residential, and they were in the process of being built out and filled up. As they get filled, then you would have had a demand for the commercial property where Sailfish Cay sits. So they kind of jumped the gun there. And
I see.
And they didn't have affordable housing. So if you go back to the study I did with nurses in particular, starting pay is about $85,000. There are literally 1,000 units available if you do a 35% rent to income ratio. At the time I looked, this is May 30th roughly, okay, to May 26th. So a couple months ago, there were 1,000 units available, either to purchase or to rent. But where it got really obvious that there's issues is when you get into the teachers, who starting pay is about $51,000, Martin County teachers, or anybody below that. There's only 29 developments or units available for these people. That's a huge problem if you're trying to recruit teachers for different schools. And I know people who are doing that. And so they were running into problems of, okay, the people don't really want to move here because they don't have a place to live. Now, that said, years ago, 33 years ago, when I moved to Stuart, I was doing the math, like, okay, a back of the napkin, math kind of a thing. I'm like, yeah, I was running about 32% rent to income back then. Well, today, there are units that teachers could find that are about 32 to 35%, a little higher. So in theory, you'd say, well, increase the teachers' pay a little bit if possible, but then the school district has problems with taxing issues and vouchers concerns and all that. So it's not an easy fix there. But I think the easiest solution, and one that would most benefit, would be the ADUs. I don't want to talk too much on one topic, but this ADUs would allow affordable housing to be built. The owners of these ADUs would be local residents. Instead of having these big affordable housing units that get built by a billionaire Wall Street firm, and then they're going to be, according to state law, they would be tax exempt for 30 years. So, come on, let's give that advantage to our people. At least let them have that opportunity. They may not want an ADU. When I'm knocking on doors, I actually found a couple of people who asked me that question. They wanted to build little units like mother-in-law suites, or a little loft above the garage that they could maybe rent out and generate some extra income because their property taxes are starting to get hit. These are people on fixed incomes. They hit the single family homes, but they were getting squeezed. So let's give them an out. Let's give them an opportunity.
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic. I've heard other representatives from other areas, other cities along the Treasure Coast who have mentioned ADUs in different facets as well, whether it be as sort of like a rental opportunity. Some of them were almost like ways to maybe look more down the line as it could be a multi-generational home, but then it could be used to create income down the line. And it's really, I appreciate you bringing up the fact about the teachers. I think that's one area where we're very lucky to have great teachers. If we look at, let's say, Martin County, we've got a great teacher base here. And one of the things that has, that I've thought of, because I have talked to a few people who are in the administration at some local schools where, if someone's been there for 20 or 30 years and maybe they bought their home 20, 30 years ago and they're able to suffice on what their salary is now, but recruiting new teachers is a whole different story. And that probably puts it into a whole different light compared to, somebody moving here from Miami who's going to sell their home for X amount of dollars. They're coming up here to buy, probably a lower cost of living. So that's an interesting,
Yeah.
that's something that's an interesting point to shed the light on, I think.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of things going on in public school systems today, and schools in general, that are create all kinds of headaches for administrators to try to find staff and to keep staff around for longevity, to where they build up some equity in wherever they're living at. But yeah, those are all good points just brought up.
Do you think, and I don't want to go back to, but you had mentioned Sailfish Cay and how that was rezoned. Maybe there would have been demand after some of those residential. Maybe some of the changes in land use may have been done a little prematurely. Do you? Is there anywhere in your mind that you think, or is there a way you think Stuart should go about finding where greater density should be? Do you think that they should probably just follow? I mean, obviously, you don't know the whole land use code off the top of your head.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's like, but it's like, I think that's where people struggle. Is everybody wants to say, hey, look, this is the land use code, and let's stick to it. And then time goes by, and then some people that are elected start to see holes and this or that. And I mean, how do you see the city going about ways to find, hey, maybe there should be greater density here, or maybe this here deserves some sort of variance or land use change, if at all?
It's a good question, fair question, and to take it back to it was the comments that came up during when they rezoned it from Sailfish Cay from commercial to residential. One of the residents pointed out, he's like, these commercial properties are in the comp plan. He says, you may not use them today, but one day you're going to need it. And he was correct. So you don't, my opponent often talks about us not following the comp plan, but he was one in this particular case, not in every case, but this particular case, he chose not to follow the comp plan. He wanted to change it from commercial to residential just because we knew we had somebody to fill that slot right away, even though we had a bunch of other residential units being built along that road. But in other areas, it goes back to the smart growth. Like that 4-story hotel, the Hilton Truth that's coming in on Colorado, it's not necessarily against the hotels. Like I did a study back in 2018, 19, somewhere in there, and I knew there's definitely a need for a hotel. And I was considering, hey, if you know of any big money people, this is a really good opportunity, because I was working with a commercial real estate guy at the time, and that was one of the projects that he had asked me to take a look at. And not that I was looking for building out the city. That's not what I'm trying to do. But let's take that 4-story hotel and put it in an area away from the downtown area. So it goes back to your question about density. Where's it going to be? Well, okay. And there's I think it's a Fairfield Inn that was potentially coming in where next to Dune Dog's at, where the old ACOG.
Yeah, where the funeral home, I think, is. Yeah.
Yeah. So potentially a 4-story hotel there might have worked. It's a little close to downtown. But maybe take it north of the bridge or south of, call it, maybe down around Indian Street, maybe south. Because what are you trying to do with Stuart? Is this going to be kind of a tourist area? And it is currently. Do you want to protect the small seaside town? Yes. Or do you want to take that, you want to put a 4-story hotel right near downtown? No. You can put it out maybe closer to I-95. There you go. And then, or build a 3-story boutique hotel, or even a 2-story. You could do half the overhead, double the price of the rooms. You'll probably get them in a nice, really attractive boutique hotel. It could have been done. So, just being smart. I'm not trying to say I'm anti-growth entirely, but let's be smart of how we do it.
Yeah, I know. And I remember I was at that meeting for the hotel. I know there was some, the Creek District Code, I think, had been amended shortly, or probably a year or two before then, maybe. And so maybe I think that there was some conversation about that, and that seems to be the case too with stuff that goes on in the county. And it's been going on even more with the, and I think you had mentioned SB 102. I think that's a Live Local Act where there's stuff going on down in Salerno that it wasn't even approved, let alone maybe people weren't aware of it. I mean, it might not even been on the docket to be talked about.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen, I don't want to go off topic with this, but I don't know if you've seen what's going on up in Fort Pierce. There's a project. I don't want to talk too much about it, but I think it's called Causeway Cove, where they're putting up a pretty large development under the Live Local Act.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that, and it does not surprise me.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm not too familiar with it either. I know, like, I had seen things were supposed to happen, but then we've got some colleagues up there that had brought it up, and I think maybe I'm sure this has been a conversation in the past, and I know you had brought up property taxes to bring, if we were to reduce property taxes or bring down the millage rate, which I assume may be part of your goal. How do you think we would go about balancing that budget, or is there already places that you think we could do it, or how do you think that looks or works?
Well, yeah, I've been looking at that, and that came up last night at the meeting, the budget at the City of Stuart meeting, and they're looking at maybe being, up to $3.5 million underfunded. Well, everybody seems to avoid the big elephant in the room, which is the CRA. They get a lot of funding. They get at least $3.5 million this next year. So would we be underfunded, really, if we didn't have the CRA? Now people say, "Oh, we have to have the CRA, this X, Y, and Z." Well, the CRA was originally established, from what I understand, to help revitalize downtown Stuart. I think that goal has been accomplished. Now I see CRA funds being used in other various ways. Some are good, and others I would say, are they really needed? People might want them, but do we really need to do that? And is that the best use of funds? So it's like whenever, if you're in the investment world, all of a sudden, boom times, I think it was Warren Buffett or maybe Greenspan, were talking about irrational exuberance and how these type of periods lead to malinvestment and eventually bubbles crash. Yeah. Well, same thing. CRAs tend to get flush with cash. The way they work, the way the thing was set up is you knew the numbers were going to go exponential as you get down the road. And they've gone exponential now. And so now this is this $10 million elephant that's eating up everybody else's lunch. And what ends up happening is the areas outside the CRA become more and more, be it gradual, but more and more on the hook to cover the cost of the entire operating budget of the City of Stuart, in this case Stuart, but in cities in general. Now there were 400 CRAs in California. They all had the same problem. They all failed. They all closed. They all got shut down, not because they accomplished their projects, and their tasks, and their objectives. No, they realized, we're running out of funds to cover basic operating expenses. So currently, I think the budget that was presented yesterday was showing two numbers. The main numbers were millage rate going back to 5.00. Currently, it's at 4.9. Then they had another number at 4.9. But if they were to go back to 5.00, we were going to be short just for funding for fire and police, which is about 52% of the budget. We're going to be short by, their increase was about 1.2 million. And the increase, if we go up to back to 5.0, was about 1.2 million. So all of the increased revenue we would get would be captured by just those two departments. And then you have other areas that obviously are going to have to be covered as well. And they're looking to expand a little bit as well. So, we can wiggle around with those numbers. I guess my point would be, the CRA would be a way to help get the budget. We may have to restructure the CRA. We may have to do away with the thing entirely. I know people don't want to hear that, but I think we can restructure it. There's good things about the CRA, don't get me wrong. But I think right now it's the point where people are starting to notice, just like they did in California, and if they don't do something to fix it, then eventually the CRA goes away entirely. So you have a decision to make.
Yeah, it's oddly comforting to hear you say I know people don't want to hear that, because a lot of times you don't hear that from politicians. A lot of times if you're running for office, that you don't want to say things that maybe people don't want to hear, but maybe they should.
Oh, yeah.
And I think just like with anything, there's certainly ways to become more efficient and to make sure that the people are being represented as well as they can. I think we've been fortunate, as tumultuous as the the politics can get. I think we've been fortunate. I'm a resident of Martin County, but obviously I've been covering most or all the Treasure Coast for 4 or 5 years now, where we've been pretty fortunate, I think, for the most part. I know there was one thing that I had read on, and it might have been on your website or it might have been something you put out on Facebook, but I thought it'd be interesting to cover it. It was in regards to home rule, and I thought it might be good to cover that. I don't want to miss it before we finish up.
Okay. Home rule. Yeah. The state, I have an image, I haven't dropped it yet. I'm thinking, how do I use it? But this, chat GPT generated image of this big cat with his claws out, and they're reaching from the state level, and they're reaching down, and they're taking control on the local level. And to me, this is completely opposite of what government should be doing, right? The Constitution was set up, okay, government's small, it's there to protect from outside forces for the most part. And then as the years have passed, and the idea of progressivism has crept in, progressivism is your rights come from the government, and you have to do what the government says. That's just completely the exact opposite of what the country was founded on, and what made the country so great, made it this flourishing place, and made the middle class this booming group that never flourished like it did before anywhere else on the planet. Well, now the middle class is under siege and under attack, and is shrinking because of this. So, people were complaining about, oh, well, we spent $10,000, $15,000 on this lawsuit to join other municipalities to defend against Senate Bill 180. And I'm thinking, okay, $15 million or $15,000 is a lot of money, but you agree to spend $15 to $30 million on a Brightline station, and
right? Do
you not see what's happening here with these live local acts and such? And even big cities who like growth, like Miami, they just recently, June 26th, I want to say, it's an article I posted on my Facebook page. Even they are beginning to recognize this is a big threat, because it allows the big the firms closest to the money supply, the Wall Street firms primarily, to get a huge advantage over local developers. And I kind of like my local developers. I know some of them. I know they're really good people. And I think they're feeling the stress too. And maybe things are getting tight for them. And should we not protect them? Of course we should. And I think home rule would help protect, really making a strong stand to try to defend home rule. I mean, this is almost like Revolutionary War type of stuff that we're getting into, where people just say enough's enough, and we're not going to take any more from this tyranny. So we want to protect our neighbors, be it developers or restaurant workers or whoever. And let's finally have that conversation of how we're going to do it.
Yeah, I appreciate those sentiments, and I think to wrap it up, if we were to be having a conversation 2 years, 4 years from now, and you were elected, what would you hope the city of Stuart looks like, or what would you hope to have completed?
I would like
4
to
years
see,
after this.
I would like to see no more four-story developments built anywhere near the downtown area. I would love to see the ball fields at Sailfish Park still stay ball fields. I know my opponent says that's what he wants, but there's little subtle clues that say he's on board seeing them developed. And I've talked to people that support him, and they give me those same kind of vibes. So I would like to see Stuart stay kind of a small, charming little seaside town as best we can. And ideally, if I'm elected, nobody knows who I am, right? Because everything's are so status quo. The city of Stuart looks charming and nothing's radical happening. There's nobody complaining about me. So
that's a good point. Yeah. The more sensationalized things get, the more your face is plastered all over the place. Maybe that's a bad sign. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Will, I appreciate you being on. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. Good luck in the race. And I'm glad that we could sit down and talk, and hopefully people learn a little bit more about who you are and what you're looking to do here in the city of Stuart.
Well, thanks, Josh. It was my pleasure. And thanks for everything you do. And I hope you can have continued success and continue to charge ahead with what you're doing, because it is most definitely a noble cause and most definitely needed. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Will. Thank you.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Current by TreasureCoast.com. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Follow us on social media or visit TreasureCoast.com for local events, tips, and news. Have a guest or topic you'd love to hear on the show? Let us know at TreasureCoast.com. Until next time, keep riding